Okay, so I'm going to kick off. First of all, welcome. What are these series of webinars about? We're looking to cover the entire journey of corporations from starting point of using AI, why some companies may not use AI as much as they want to, why AI is for all of us, not just developers, how developers can use it, how managers can use it, and indeed how product owners can use it. So we're going to go through each of those areas, and your feedback is really important to us. What would you be most interested in hearing about first? We're going to focus on why adoption works, why it stalls, some simple practical next steps, and also just going through some kind of prompt ideas to help your thinking. And then right at the end, I have probably the most important thing that I think you should be preparing for in your work in the next 9 to 12 months. I think it's so important. I created a specific slide for it. That's coming at the end. So a little bit of a teaser from that point of view. Again, we've got 25 minutes at the beginning, and then we're going to have Q&A at the end. The amazing Yella is answering your questions or helping to gather your questions, and we'll go use this. Okay, so what are we why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? We're looking at why we stop, or why corporations that roll out, say, AI or proof of concepts, why do they stall? Why do they stop working? And what is this difference between consumer AI, like ChatGPT and stuff like that we use on our desktops as consumers, and corporate AI? And there's going to be a lag between desktop AI and corporate AI. And we'll go into that as well as we look forward that. Just as a top, too long didn't read. The reason why it stalls is generally a little bit of fear from all people involved, unclear rules, misunderstanding about cost, because it does cost, and people not looking to, or people looking to avoid risk. We've got some techniques in here. We're going to look to unblock that. So how can you, in your organization, just get it a little further? If it's not open, we'll give you some ideas and techniques to get it open and to use AI. If it's stored or blocked, we'll also go into some techniques on that as well. We're going to cover Agentics at the end. And also we're going to start to have a look at some of the kind of cost areas as well. So cost governance. So a couple of areas in here that what we look at is in the UK, where did it work? So we've got Microsoft, bless them. They did a rollout to 20,000 UK government departments in the UK. And on average from that report, 25 minutes was saved. So that means that workers were showing a 25-minute saving. Now, if you can imagine, if you did the math on that, that's quite a lot for 20,000 employees. Interestingly, 80% said they would never give it up, which means there's 20% that said, yeah, I don't need it. And that's what I'm interested in, because are those cursors or understanding for what's happening in the future? After this study, they went and extended it over to 31,000. So that means a lot of people are looking to get productivity improvements, and those are going to be the low-hanging fruits, and those are going to be the easy places for us to start at. There was also the Work Trends Index that was there. So if you're interested in those, I'll give you some links for these as well afterwards. They said that 82% of leaders were looking at using AI. 80% of agents were integrating into the strategy, and you can read the rest on there. I'm not going to go why it works. We know that there is some need there. What you're here for, I believe, is why doesn't it work? What is the things that I can do to overcome the problems? Don't tell me it's amazing. Everybody in the world is telling us it's amazing. So let's go through that. Why would it be a real, what are the blockers? I think a lot of the time we as users, and if you can imagine, and I'm obviously an advocate, I should probably say, who am I, Tony Wood, to be speaking about this? I got really excited. I love this subject. I'm Tony Wood. I've built a bank in the UK. I've created maybe 7, 8 businesses over my 40-year experience, mainly working in IT. I really got into LLMs around about in 2022, Agentics later on in 2023. I just really took over my life, and creating long-lived agentic workers has become a bit of a passion for me. I spend a lot of my time working on that. I'm head of lab at Juvo Lab, where we look to implement all of these tools at a scalable, solid methodology or a solid method that we can work. And within that, I'm sure with the Juvo team, we've gone through a lot of these blockers, which is, I'm not, some people will say, I'm not going to allow you to put ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever, anywhere near my data because I don't want it stolen. So there's a lot of unclear rules. In the bank, apart from a bunch of different roles like operations, I was also running procurement for all of the bank products. And I know as head of procurement, I took on all the risk of a tool running wild. So in that situation, your procurement, give them a hug. They want to make sure they protect the company. They have their rules. And unless somebody says it's safe, you are not going to be able to roll it out. So we're going to help them, give them some of that information. So, we've all got to be in it together from that point of view. Sometimes there can be in the blame culture. If it goes wrong, I'm going to hold you personally responsible. I've heard that. Again, these are things that stop us from moving forward. And also, we discussed that personal AI does move a little bit faster than business AI. So what happens? Well, when we, put a blocker up for people, people just use their own stuff. So I've got my phone here. I absolutely can just use AI. And so that's where we get shadow AI. And there was a report, I think, that said something like 50% of all corporate usage is shadow AI. And that's obviously very insecure, or can be insecure. So when we're personal, we take personal responsibility for things breaking. When it's in a company, the company takes responsibility for things breaking. So it's a very, very different rule set. So again, a lot of the tools that we're having right now, and you'll see that from co-work, etc., they're great for the generics, right? They're brilliant for the generics. But when we want specifics for our business, how our business work, it needs direct access to our data. It doesn't have that. And that's why there's a percentage of things that will work for generic, and I see those coming along quite quickly. But changing your infrastructure, changing your tools, changing the way that your systems work, which were built for our eyes and our hands. They were built for those. They weren't built for data interchange. They were built for silos. And a lot of SaaS companies have spent a lot of time keeping you in those silos. So again, you've got to be quite careful about how that works. And of course, there are security threats, a whole bunch of us. We may have a whole session on that if that's something that people find interesting. Okay. So how can we adopt this safely? Well, there's an interesting place where AI has been in the past, and it's been in the domain of IT. So, and that seems natural, right? It's a technology, it's a tool. Let's pop it into IT. But I'm suggesting as we start to move into more agentic areas and agentic workers, it's more of an HR ops area because they're doing tasks, they're doing roles. And in the same way, they need to be managed. The output, if they're working 8 hours a day on a task, they need to be managed, they need to be trained, they need to be onboarded. And IT doesn't have those skills. They turn it on, they turn it off, and they maintain it. And IT workers do an incredible job. Love them. I've been in sysadmin for what, 40 years in various roles. So, we keep the world running. But HR, ops, and leadership, they manage. And so what you're starting to see now is the people who understand how to manage AI rather than just use it as a tool are going to get the most benefit. IT also has this incredible role of enabling the guardrails. What can you send out? What can't you send out? What are the things that we should be doing? How do they protect us from ourselves? That is the role of IT. So, a takeaway, ask in your company, where does AI sit? Who do I talk to? And what are their concerns? What are their concerns from that? And we can start off by saying, okay, what are the clear policies here? What are the policies that we have in the company? Has anyone else adopted it safely? Are there any live demos that we can use that we can have a look at? We've got some prompting discipline that we can work on. And also we'll make sure that we understand costs. If you go to your IT department or to your AI lead and say, I know that these things are issues. I will manage them. I'll work with you to manage. Can I be on that pilot? Would that be something that would be okay? And let's just jump ahead. And the people who spend their time learning and getting ahead on this, I think are likely to be the winners as we move forward because this train is not stopping. So let's have a look at that. What are the areas that when you're having that conversation with your IT team or with your leadership team, you say, hey, can I have a quick look at the information security policy, GDPR, acceptable use, procurement, and records and retention? These are the kind of areas that you'll be interested in because these actually, funnily enough, you can have an AI policy, but everything that the risk involved in this is all about data leakage, data usage, and downstream processing. Those are the things that your company is going to be worried about. Are my secrets, my ways of working, my tacit ways of working, which is their secret sauce, your secret sauce, how am I protecting that from going and being absorbed? So there's going to be simple things that they'll tell you how to do, like turn off training. Don't use the information to train it. And you should be looking for that in all of the areas that you're looking at. And also, you're going to want to understand what a good policy looks like. So you're going to want to look at it. If it blocks you and says you cannot use anything beyond that, you're saying, okay, what's the risk? So if they're being prescriptive about you cannot use AI, you get why? What's the driver? And you have to gauge, is your company interestingly enough, if your company is in has no competition, they're unlikely to change. If your company has competition and your competitors are using AI to get ahead, it'll take a while, but what will happen is you will find that they will start to be more productive, which means they'll cost less or they'll be faster. They'll make less mistakes. So this is something I know every company wants, but maybe they just don't know what they should change. So this is something to have a look at. What would you be looking for in the information security policy? You're looking for, can I list it as an external processor? Is it allowed? And it may be they say, hey, cannot go outside the EU. I ran a bank in the UK. We couldn't get put data outside the EU or the UK. So you go, great, I'll use Mistral. I'm happy with that. That's within the EU. It's covered. It's European. That's what we can work with. So we do have in EU tools that we can work with that enable us to actually cover some of those kind of questions of you can't send it to another country. And Data Shield, as we know, kind of got blown away a while ago. We're also looking at data protection and GDPR, which means we shouldn't be putting personal data in there. Again, this is something that your company has for email with data loss protection, for emails, etc. But also have a think about how could you use it in AI? An acceptable use policy, what are you able to use? Have a look at that, see how it works. And then procurement, please, 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 as someone who's run procurement, just give them a hug if that's acceptable. But basically, they really need it because they are looking at everybody has to use AI, but how do I use it safely? How do I put it through the right controls? And if you're regulated, those are going to be quite extensive from that point of view. And then, of course, records. What did you put in? What did you take out? Those are now business records. They are discoverable. You would be surprised what goes in there. And a case in point there is tools like if you put, say, a privileged piece of information in there from a lawyer and you put it into ChatGPT, it loses privilege. Even via an API, because those APIs get stored for about 60 days. So they're discoverable at that point. So you've got to be careful about what are you putting in here and what are you not. Now you can solve those problems by running a local large language model or build the controls. But the thing is, know what the problem is. So we understand what the problem is, so then we can go through and build up some answers. So what does good look like from a tool point of view? So I would think always when we're using things like ChatGPT, when we're using Mistral, put things into projects. So you'll notice that there will always be items within projects that you can actually go through and use. Let me just pull one up here. Where's my Mistral project? Here we go. So if I'm using Mistral, then I've got the practical adoption. So I said, okay, what do I put in here? I can use ChatGPT. It's within a project and I can create a new project in there should I need to. So use projects, and that's about context, and we'll come back to that in a bit because that's the battle that you're looking at. Mistral is really good. So if you're in the EU, that's going to be an area where it's really going to enable you to be able to solve some of those problems of jurisdiction. And there's some pretty cool tools, but they are different. You can't just swap out Mistral, say ChatGPT and put in Mistral. There are very slight differences. They deal with images and some areas differently, but sometimes they actually do a nice document import as well. Gemini as well, if you're using Gemini and it's within your Google environment, then that may be a go-to for doing your drive. So you're not just going to live in one tool, you're going to live in a whole bunch, and you're going to pick the best tool for the job. And for example, things like NotebookLM, that's a nice way for us to be able to put, Q&A around a whole bunch of those tools. And let me have a look where. I think I did a NotebookLM here. There we go. And so I put one in here, and then you can then get some audio from that point of view, and it does a kind of podcast from that perspective as well. So you can go generating the audio, it can generate videos, etc. So this is the webinar that you're able to go through and put together. So it depends what you want to use. How do you want to get ahead with this? And it will take some time for you to invest in trying this out. So there is a little bit of experimentation that I would recommend. All these tools are free, generally for you to use as a consumer. So get ahead, practice in a safe environment before you're working. Then when you go to your IT department or AI teams, you can then go in and work with it. So with that, one second, let me just grab my coffee. So chat, how are we doing? So are we doing okay? Everybody still there? I see we've got some questions coming in. Okay, excellent. So that's a little bit of this beginning part of our journey. We're looking at prompting discipline. I would recommend when you're building the prompt, and a lot of times when people look at AI and they say, oh, it's just a bit rubbish or it's AI slop. AI slop is generally because how we put in our information in there is generally, imagine you're working with an intern who's just joined your organization. You say, hey, can you write up this financial report? They'll go, and they're confident, right? Yeah, of course, I'll do that for you. And they'll just make stuff up because they really want to give you an answer. And AI really wants to give you an answer. So you can sit there and you can change it slightly to help you get better answers than somebody else using exactly the same engine. So what you're going to want to do is think about the role. So when you're asking ChatGPT, imagine you're writing a finance report. You are a finance expert who understands Belgian financial law. That's the role. The task, I want you to go through and give me 5 points that I should look at, the top 5 points, by looking at everything else in this report and understand what it is. It could say constraints, only use the report here, or only look at Belgian law. So you're giving it some constraints. And then you're saying output, what do I want my output to look like? And you can then use different projects to actually give these different disciplines. So you're using a different tool for the different type of output that you're interested in. And this is more, you can keep these prompts in a different area or just remember them. Or what I do, I very rarely type anymore. I tend to just use voice on everything. And that raises an interesting thing maybe for a future webinar, if you're interested, is the future of how we work. Because I know, but like you, when I worked in a place where everybody was on the phone all the time, it was really tricky to understand. And AI is going to have that same issue. So I'm constantly talking back and forth to different agentics all the time and context swapping, changing between them. So that's going to be something that may affect the way that we look at our offices. Right. Simple tasks that we want to do is maybe importing a document. So again, this is something where we want it to have a look at something like a policy or an invoice or a contract or something. And these are things we do all day long, but it can silently hallucinate. And it does that because it has this great knowledge that it's working with in the frontier model like ChatGPT or Mistral. So it knows a whole bunch of things. And we need to actually help it go, no, no, no. Don't use what you know from someone else. Only use the information that's based on the files that I have uploaded, nothing else. And if the information isn't found, say, hey, I don't know, because it really wants to help us. It really wants to, because it knows and it will learn. And you'll notice if you use a particular tool for a long period of time, it will adapt. It will learn what you like, just like a good friend won't wind you up in that situation. And that's what it's doing. It's slowly learning how it works. And again, you can sit there and say for each claim citation. So think about what are the things that if you were asking a new person in a role to do an onboarding, and that's why I think that AI is more about onboarding individuals than it is um, implementing the tool. You've got to train it. How is it working with this information? And also, how do you know, how are you going to verify it? People use guardrails, but how do I know it's good? How do I know this is something that is useful? You can pop it into a second model, which sometimes I do, or you can actually ask it to self-check. I actually, in a lot of the tools that I have, because sometimes when you ask a model to go out, the links sometimes are broken or missing. I have an absolute moderator task that goes through and checks those links. And sometimes they don't always work. So we're looking at what would be a best practice when you're working with prompting in any of these areas. The first is break it down into your role, the task you want it. What is the context I want my agentic or my AI to have? You want to reduce the scope of what it can do. So if you gave someone an answer, think of the smartest person you know, and you said, "Hey, can you tell me about this particular document?" They would go off and tell you a whole bunch of things because their context window is vast. You don't want that. You want someone, I want context within my company, within my particular area. That's what I'm interested. So you only give it the information that you want it to have. You go back to the previous point. We say only use this document. Don't think about something else. Or it can sometimes just go to its local memory. Oh, pull it out. I don't need to go to the document. So you're going to force it there. And this kind of works into the aspect of quality. So we're going to want to explain to it what the behavior is and what the scope is. And that's why I generally will talk to a lot of the prompts, because you're trying to give it as much context of here's an example of what good looks like. Here's an example where that works. And then also just go through and iterate and say, hey, can you check that? Can you see if that works? And what we're looking to do is we're looking to reduce the ambiguity, otherwise known as hallucinations. And also, if everybody has these same sorts of rules, when different people use AI across different teams, suddenly you start to get a lot more consistency within there. So this is one that only came out. Claude Cowork only came out, when was it? 29th it was released to the general public, so about 6 days. It's only on Mac. Sorry, Windows users. Why do I add this in? I think this is a good example of something I would use personally, maybe in your own personal contracts. It sits on the desktop. If you probably saw the last few days, a whole bunch of stocks just went bust or went down in the stock market because they realized that maybe 50, 60% of all legal work is checking a contract for the basics, right? And this can check for the basics. You add in legal, you upload, and it will give you a firm idea based on a general lawyer. Obviously, you need to get legal advice. I'm not saying this is a replacement for legal advice or tax or whatever, but it's a good starting point. And a lot of the time, we want to have a good starting point for how we want to work. Also, it's got a lot of understanding. It knows about finance. It knows about legal issues. So it's got that knowledge baked in, not knowledge that has been taken from, Twitter or other places, X or whatever. This is knowledge, and Anthropic has done incredible work of tying into knowledge sources for expert. And this is why you have a knowledge bucket in your business. It's called your data. It's called your tacit work, the way that you work. That is the most powerful thing that you have. The generic stuff, everybody's got it now. The generic knowledge, everybody's got it. What you have in your business, that is the only value left, and your business and the way that your businesses work. Everything else is repeatable. And I think once we understand that, we can start delving into it. And a lot of us, our data or our structures, our documents are in silos. They're only human accessible, or maybe they're not as refined or clean as we want. This is your gold mine. This is the area that I would look at. So again, you can have a look at Claude co-work from that point of view. So this is if we say there, that's where we're looking at prompting. I then want to go to the next level, and of course, the teaser I gave right at the beginning of what would I recommend you do, the single most important thing that you could do over the next 6 to 9 months, that's coming up. So agentics, what are agentic workers? Agentic workers are very similar to what we talked about at the beginning when we looked at the role and the task we're looking to give. But we add in a couple of extra things. So we say, if you can imagine, you were hiring your dream team for your role, right? For your business. And you said, I need a researcher, someone to review it, someone to put it together, and then some kind of project manager. So you would create a role for each of those individual items. You'd create the tasks that they complete. It's going to be tricky because sometimes in our roles we're not always clear what the tasks are that we complete, and they're not documented. It's just built up over time in tacit knowledge within our business. And then the tools that we can work with. So simple tools would be like web browser or search. But maybe there's other things like access to our CRM, access to maybe our data area, a tool of access to our documents. They are all tools that each individual crew within this agentic environment would have access to. And then context, in the same way that context is important for the role, for the prompts that we had, it's also really, really important for your agentic workers. You don't want to give them every bit of information because then you're likely to get information that isn't aligned with what you want. So you give them the right context to do the job and no more. They don't even need to know what's going on in other departments. And we can talk again in another webinar about how you manage your multi-agent crews. Do you have multiple levels of management? Do you have single levels? Do you let them know everything's going on? There's some great work that's being done within those areas right now. And then the history. What have I done before that's relevant to me, or a shared context for this crew which has a task to complete? So that's your starting point for your agentics, and that enables you to then work through a whole bunch of those areas and speed up your move into agentic worker environments. And I would recommend maybe a proof of concept in a safe area, which you know well. And then what you can do is you can then, once you go, aha, I get it, I know this is doing, you can then scale it up. Just be warned a little bit. Some of the things that look like they work at small scale may not work at large scale. So that's a good place for you to start. Again, so here, what do our workers need? 3 most important things your workers need, and the teaser, or you're going to need, is the definition of ready. How is it know when it's ready to run? When do I have enough information to run? Am I ready? Am I something that needs to work? The definition of done. When am I complete? It could be, for example, if you're asking your agentic to go and get you 5 links, the definition of done is I've got 5 links. Well, you may want the definition of done to be I want 5 links that you've gone to and you've checked and you've made sure they're not blank pages. You've made sure they're relevant to what we want. And again, you need to define what is relevant. And that is the definition of good. So what does good look like? When I've asked it to go and get a link, what does a good link look like? And again, a lot of the time, developers and engineers have done this for a long time. They've always had the definition of what good likes. But when we're working, sometimes we don't know what good likes because it can take maybe 3 to 6 months. You put in a marketing campaign, you don't hear anything for maybe 3 to 6 months. So again, it's starting for us to sit there and go, okay, what does good look like? How can we start defining that for our agentics? Because sometimes we may not know it ourselves. Start writing it down. So again, so what would I recommend that you would do? Define what Ready, good, and especially done and good looks for you for every single role that you fulfill. And we are no longer, I believe, in the next 6 to 9 months, we'll no longer have like jobs that you do. You'll have roles and skills that you can complete because AI and Agentics will be doing a whole raft of the general stuff. And we would need to then orchestrate those roles, very much managerial roles. And you cannot do that if you don't know what good looks like. You will end up with slop, but you'll end up with slop at great speed. So, in the same way that a lot of workers, if you work with, if you left someone on their own to go off and work for a year, that wouldn't work. So we in work we have various techniques that we do that. We have stand-ups, we have weekly meetings, and they're keeping us aligned with how that would work. So again, I would think about how you define these and some of the rituals that you use for you as an individual. Think about what that would relate when you're starting to run agentic teams. So again, that I think is the single most important thing that you can start to do, because you can do that without an agentic. And when agentics come, you can then feed that into that role, and you will then start to be able to run multiple agentics because you've spent the time getting ready and prepping. The other area, I'm just looking at cost at time. Sorry, looking at cost, looking at time. Cost is an area I'd recommend we look at in projects. How much it costs? You can burn a lot of money very quickly. So I would really recommend keeping an eye. How much does this cost? Set your budget limits. Get them agreed. A lot of people are quite scared. When I was doing some work over Christmas, I usually spent $1,000 just in a week because I had lots of agents doing lots of different things. I produced a lot of value, but does your company able to use that value after that? And you think about the flow, this cadence of, can the humans who are working alongside keep up? And what should that cadence be? So again, cost and telemetry, maybe that's something that we could look at in the end. So I think we'll come to if there's any questions, but the final line here is that I think it isn't blocked by a capability to use it. I think it's slowed because a lot of the time we don't have the structures in our work to be able to use it. It's great that it's on my phone or it's on my desktop, but it can't reach into my CRM. It can't reach into my finance system. It can't reach into the data of my systems. Only humans can do that, and I'm not allowed to do it. So it limits its capability. Other people who have solved those problems and put those guardrails around with clear governance, clear data boundaries, and also making sure it's audible, they are going to be the ones that run ahead. So this is a game we will have to play in now. It's not enough to say, no, I'm not going to do it. That will have serious impacts and issues. So I would really like if there's any questions that we can answer. I see that we can put it in PDF. Yep, I'll put it into a PDF. How would you like that formatted? Because I can put a PDF together in any way. So I will absolutely put it into a PDF. Do you want it in the format of the slide decks, or would you like it thematically? Because I use AI to produce this, so I can use AI to produce the PDF as well. And interestingly enough, that raises the question where a lot of people who are producing things that are like PowerPoint and Word, if everybody finds it easier to just use the raw information and then create something like HTML to display, and then when someone says I want it PDF, I can just create it in another format that's built for the page, why would you use them? So you can see why a lot of SaaS companies are really scared right now. Okay, so we will absolutely do that. Can I use all of this in ChatGPT? Interesting question. So ChatGPT is I use generally all of them. Yes, you can use ChatGPT, but I would recommend you use things like Cursor. Cursor is a nice, easy, friendly way to look at, and it uses ChatGPT as an engine, and also maybe Claude Code, Claude Cowork is probably one of the safest places for you to start. I would look at those two. ChatGPT is great for prompting, great for doing research, great for those tasks where you just want to get back and forth. Or, if I'm going for a walk, I'm talking all the time. I'm putting ideas down. I'm recording ideas. I'm putting those into project areas. That will be useful in the future. So I use ChatGPT all the time. I will use generally Cursor as well to work. So it's going to be start off with the areas that you feel comfortable with, customize them, make sure that they work the way that you want them to. Make sure you start to build up the context. You'll notice that managing context, I think, is going to be the skill of 2026. And context is about the data it has access to. If you use a new tool, it doesn't know about you. It doesn't know what you like or what you don't like. And it can get confused. So we need to help it understand, give it context of what you're working on. So yeah, absolutely, you can use that. Are there any other questions? I think we answered three, but I'm sure there are. If you're a reflective thinker, please ask us questions afterwards. And also, we're really, really interested in understanding what would you like us to talk about next? There are so many amazing areas that we can talk about. But the key areas, the thing that I would really, really, really ask you to do is who's responsible for AI in your company? Ask them, what can I use? How can I get going? What can I do even in my own personal stuff? I won't touch data, but what can I do to be ready for any of the proof of concepts or the work that you're doing? And also start to think about where your silos are in your business. There's going to be a whole bunch of different areas. And if AI can't get to it, it can't help you improve. And if it's slow and painful, think about the things you do. Oh, I hate doing that. It really annoys me. Those are the areas we want to improve. And that's where everybody's looking, how can I get our AI to safely access the work data information, to take away the drudgery? That will elevate us as humans to do the things where we're directing, we're creating incredible things, right? We can do great things now because we've created like tubes and trains that get us places faster where we used to walk. I think that AI is going to start that. Where it goes after 2 years, who knows? But right now, this is going to be an incredible, fun adventure for everybody. And I just ask that each and every one of you get involved with us at Juvo to come on that adventure with us. Thank you. Hey Daisy, test came through. So, chat, anything else that you would like to cover or talk about, or any feedback, please? No? Okay. So, what I would do, Yella, um, I think that is it. Thank you very much, everyone, for spending your time and your lunchtime with us. I've enjoyed preparing this. It was really good fun. I want your feedback. What is the journey that you want us to go on together? And please, 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 any questions or any blockers, raise it, and we'll look to cover that in future webinars. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.